It's no secret that there's a certain amount of distaste for the Star Wars prequels. They've got some problems, yeah, but there's lots of people who love them. And though this may immediately sink my ship, I'm one of those people. I grew up with the prequels, and though I can see the faults in them, I still enjoy them for what they are. Even if the trilogy itself received an overall lukewarm reception, there's one prequel that seems to be accepted more than any other. That prequel is Revenge of the Sith. Now, I'm not here to argue about the movies. I'll save that controversy for another day when I have more to lose. But the impact Revenge of the Sith had is undeniable. I remember being ridiculously stoked for its release, and it wasn't just me. The theater nearby almost constantly had huge lines for the film, and I remember almost everyone in my class at the time was constantly talking about how intense and great the movie would be, and then eventually was. And like any major movie, Revenge of the Sith received a video game adaptation across numerous systems. Today though, we're talking about the PS2 and Xbox version. So how is the Revenge of the Sith game? Is it truly the chosen one? Or is it just another coarse, rough, and irritable licensed game? Let's find out. Developed by LucasArts and The Collective, which is an incredibly shady name for a game development company, the Revenge of the Sith game is something of a mix between a hack-and-slash game and a 3D fighting game. Made to cover the major events of the movie, the main story mode has you play as Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, as they traverse numerous environments seen in the movie. The game is weird in that it completely skips or alters some parts of the story, while going more in-depth into other parts. Some of the alterations are neat, like a deeper look into Anakin's participation in Order 66, or Obi-Wan's escape from Utapau, while others are kinda odd. The weirdest one being that Palpatine didn't really do anything to Mace Windu when he was confronted by him in his office. See, in the movie, Mace confronts Palpatine in his office, alongside Master Kit Fisto, Master Agen Kolar, and Master Sassy Teen. I'm not sure I pronounced the last one properly because I've never been a big fan of him. In order to arrest Palpatine for, being the Dark Lord of the Sith, and perpetuating the Clone Wars, and pretty much doing everything bad in the prequels. This leads to an ultimate clash between Windu and Palpatine, with Palpatine killing all the other Jedi Masters, and eventually killing Windu using lightning, after Anakin shows up and surprisingly cuts off Windu's hand because Palpatine tells him to. In the game, however, Palpatine doesn't do a whole lot to Windu. You don't even see him use forced lightning at any point. Anakin just strolls in to see Windu threatening Palpatine, and then decides to go ham on him. I'm not joking, Anakin just goes nuts and full-on murders Windu. While I guess you could say this shows how far Anakin's fallen, it overwrites his first real act of evil against the Republic, which, while still dark, isn't quite as insanely homicidal, which helps to make Anakin's fall seem a bit less sudden. Similarly, Anakin just straight up kills Dooku during their fight without Palpatine's encouragement. Basically, this game's version of Anakin is just a crazy stone-cold assassin the whole time. On the other hand, a lot of major elements from the film are practically non-existent in the game. For example, you don't see Padme once. Not once! And that's weird, because Anakin's whole fall to the dark side kinda revolves around his fear of losing Padme, after losing his mom and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure the only mention of her is in a line that you might hear in the climactic battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mustafar. I couldn't even get it while trying to capture the fight. They could have even just thrown in a cutscene with, Anakin confiding in Palpatine after being named Vader, about how he wants to prevent Padme's death. This would help establish a reason for Anakin's craziness, beyond his repeated yelling of,
"You're the one who's betraying the Republic."
The most insane addition is definitely an alternate ending, where Anakin slays Obi-Wan on Mustafar, then kills Palpatine and rules the galaxy. I know the ending of Revenge of the Sith isn't happy, but dang, this takes it to the next level. Anyways, the battles between characters are often sprinkled with lines from the movie as well, which is a nice touch and goes a long way in giving the fight some extra life, even if some of the lines are delivered oddly. And trust me, the delivery of some lines is very suspect. This one in particular stands out to me.
Anakin, please, come back to the light.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. But I'll get back to the audio later. Overall, the plot is okay for an adaptation. It covers most of the movie's major events, despite the total lack of Padme, and some odd additions. So, it does an okay job. The game's gameplay is very hit and miss. The game's single-player campaign is divided into two sections, like I said before. Longer hack-and-slash levels with hints of platforming, and one-on-one duels with other major characters from the film. You play as Anakin and Obi-Wan throughout the story, which gives the gameplay a bit of variety. They're slightly different from one another in combat, which keeps the otherwise samey campaign from getting too dull. Not that the story is completely dull. The Order 66 mission is really enjoyable, if only because of how different it is in comparison to most levels, and all the duel portions are great. It's just the hack-and-slash sections that get somewhat old. For the first few levels, they're pretty fun, and they do a decent, if not somewhat basic, job of conveying the feeling of being a Jedi. The real problem with the levels is their length. Each level feels like it overstays its welcome ever so slightly, which is just enough to make it feel mundane by the end. Not to mention the actual combat and platforming is broken up by these cursed door or wall panel cutting sections. When you need to go through a sealed door, you cut through it with your lightsaber like at the beginning of The Phantom Menace. The only problem is that it takes forever and happens far too often. Over and over and over, the action and combat of the levels is broken up by sections of rapidly spinning your analog stick to cut through doors or panels. This is Star Wars right here, this right there.
Otherwise, the levels are pretty average for a hack-and-slash game. The gameplay isn't broken or anything, but it's not remarkable either. It's pretty fun to slash through enemy droids and clones though, even if it gets old towards the end. The force powers in the game are pretty average as well. You can push and pull enemies as you would expect, along with the special force ability unique to Anakin or Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan can stun an enemy by using the force, while Anakin eventually learns force lightning. Anakin never does this in the movies, which makes it a somewhat confusing addition, but it's cool nonetheless. After completing a level, you have points to spend on improving aspects of each character. You can upgrade the effectiveness of their force abilities, or their stats, like health and force regeneration. Most of these upgrades do have a noticeable effect on your character's abilities, so it's worth it to invest your points in whatever skills you deem worthy. The one-on-one duels are easily the best part of the game. Most of the major fights from the movie are covered, with the only glaring exception being Yoda vs. Sidious. This is odd since there are models of Yoda and Sidious that are used in cutscenes, and even a bonus mission where you play as Yoda, but I guess it's because the game focuses on Anakin and Obi-Wan. The gameplay isn't too different in duel mode, since you use the same lightsaber attacks and whatnot that you would in the story mode, including stabs, which can result in a very dark ending to a fight. These duels do give off the Star Wars feeling, more so than anything in the game, as it becomes an exchange of slashes and blocks and force abilities, with each character throwing various lines of dialogue at one another. It's a pretty decent Star Wars duel simulator if nothing else. Progressing through the story mode unlocks characters and stages for the multiplayer mode, and special missions to be done in single player. The multiplayer mode is really neat, as it's basically duel mode, but with the ability to choose from a number of different characters and stages. And there are even characters whose appearances are exclusive to the multiplayer mode and missions, namely Darth Vader and Old Ben, as well as a Death Star stage, which is a really nice touch. The multiplayer also has a lot of cool costumes. You can be Dooku presumably before he left the Jedi Order to be a Sith, Anakin with a red lightsaber if he had never gotten burnt up, and even a very cool Sith-esque Grievous who has all red lightsabers and a very intimidating and dark design. The only problem with the multiplayer and the costumes is that you can't actually select different costumes. The only way to use an alternate costume is to have the other player also choose that character, making the alternate costume your default. And that seems like a really bad design choice. There's no way to actually choose the really cool alternate costume, which seems like a totally missed opportunity. As for the missions you unlock throughout the story, they're basically hack-and-slash challenges with set goals and different characters. They're actually pretty cool, as you get to be the expected characters, like Anakin and Grievous, while one mission has you play as a Magna Guard, and another has you play as Yoda. It's pretty cool stuff. All in all, the game plays pretty well. Some aspects are oddly designed and can get kinda boring, but it's an okay experience overall, with the dual mode and bonus missions really standing out. The game's visuals go between decent and kinda off. Things like the main character's faces and the environments actually look pretty good. This game really nails the intimidating Anakin face especially. On the other hand, minor characters and enemies, especially clone troopers, look kinda bad. Compare the clones in Battlefront and Battlefront 2, which came out shortly after this game, to the clones in this one, and you'll see what I mean. This was also one of those games that used compressed clips from the movie it's based on as part of some of the cutscenes. They don't look too bad though, it's just a funny sign of the times I guess. Otherwise, everything looks alright. All of the major planets from the movie are visited, and they all look pretty good for a PS2 game, so I can't complain too much on that front. The game's sound is also somewhat mixed. This game also uses John Williams' score rather well,
which adds real atmosphere to certain parts. Killing Jedi in the temple as Anakin was definitely a rather extreme experience, in part thanks to the intense music. A lot of the game's voices come from the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series. You know, the animated Clone Wars series by the guy behind Samurai Jack. If you've never seen it, check it out, because it's awesome. Anyways, most of the voices are pretty good. James Arnold Taylor still seems to be settling into the Obi-Wan role, as it's a bit rough here compared to his performance in the more recent Clone Wars series, which should also be watched, but he does a decent job. Matt Lucas does a pretty good Anakin as well, as he could definitely pass for Hayden Christensen. You can feel the anger in a lot of his lines, which, in my opinion, is pretty impressive, even if the lines aren't the best. The rest of the cast is pretty much the cast from the recent Clone Wars series, and they all do respectable enough jobs. Dooku, Windu, Yoda, and everyone else sounds pretty much as they should, which is all you can ask, really. So, no real complaints on that front. So, is the Revenge of the Sith game good? Overall, yeah, it's pretty decent. The game certainly has its faults, but all in all, especially considering it's a licensed game, it's actually pretty enjoyable. The multiplayer mode can be really fun, and the game definitely presents a unique take on the plot. And as someone who really loves Revenge of the Sith, I think it's worth checking out. It's like $10 on the PSN, and I'd say that's worth it if only for the multiplayer, provided you have friends that love Star Wars as well. So, the game may not necessarily be the chosen one, but it's a decent addition to the ever-growing catalog of Star Wars games. And that's okay with me.